Hi all and welcome to a new class of Principle of Macroeconomics. Today we are going to cover chapter 18. With chapter 18 we are going to switch gears. So far we have focused our analysis in a closed economy, an economy that was not interacting with other economies in the world. In chapter 18 we are going to switch gears and we are going to move to an open economy. That is an economy that interacts with other economy in the world. Now, the goal of this chapter are threefold. First of all, we want to try to understand the determinants of the flows of goods between countries and the flows of assets within countries. And this, if you want, represents the quantities. We are economists. We have quantities and prices. If the first goal is about understanding the quantities, the second goal is about understanding the prices. And in particular, we are going to talk about exchange rates and explain the differences between real exchange rate and nominal exchange rate. The third goal is to understand the purchasing power parity. And how can we use this new concept in order to determine the nominal exchange rates? To this end, we are going to structure this chapter in three main sections. In the first section, we are going to talk about the flows of goods. In the second section, we are going to talk about the flows of assets. And in the third section, we are going to talk about exchange rates. Let us start with the first section. The goal of this section is to understand the flows of goods among countries. Like we did in chapter 10 and in chapter 11, we start by putting our accountant hat and learn how to measure these flows of goods. For that, we need a couple of concepts. In particular, we need the concepts of exports, the concepts of imports. Now, exports are domestically produced goods and services that are sold abroad. Conversely, imports are foreign produced goods and services that are sold domestically. What are net export? Net export is the difference between the value of the exports and the value of the imports. Let us give some examples. In chapter 3, we learn that countries specialize in the products on which they have a comparative advantage. And the United States has a comparative advantage in a huge variety of products, like technological products, as Microsoft has shown, or Apple in products like the iPhone, iPad, Hollywood movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, Kill Bill, Pulp Fiction, The Legend of 1900. Animated movies like Toy Story, Incredible, Frozen, The Lion King. And United States also exports where Italians, European, Asians come to the United States as tourists to see the wonders of this country. Similarly, other countries specialize in the production of products on which they have a comparative advantage. And the United States imports assistance when they buy jamón ibérico from Spain, when they buy some fancy cheese from France, when they go for a trip to France. Or when they go for a trip as tourists to Italy.
When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore.
And of course, the United States imports when they buy manufacturing goods or other products from
China.
What are net export? Net export is the difference between the value of the exports and the value of the imports. So the net export measures the imbalance in a country's trade in goods and services. In particular, when the imports are larger than the export, then the net export is negative and the country experiences a trade deficit. Conversely, when the exports are larger than the import, then net export is positive and the country experiences what is defined as a trade surplus. When the value of the export and the value of the import is equal, then net export is equal to zero and a country experiences a balanced trade. Let us look at the historical net export of the United States. Now notice that until 1980s, if you want, 1980s was the last year where export were at least as large as import. So before 1980s, there has been a period of existence from 1960 to 1970 where the value of the export was higher of the value of the imports, and therefore the United States experienced a trade surplus. After 1980s, the value of the imports has always been larger than the value of the export. So since 1980, in particular 1982, the United States have experienced a trade deficit. And we are done with the measuring of the flows of goods. But we are economists. We want to understand the determinants of the flows of goods. We want to understand the determinants of net export. For this, I'm going to propose 6 candidates of the determinants of net exports. First, consumer preferences for domestic or foreign goods. Second, prices of domestic and foreign goods. Third, incomes of consumers in your country, the domestic country, or income of consumers in foreign countries, as a third reason. Fourth, the exchange rates at which you can exchange your domestic currency with foreign currencies. 5, transportation cost. And 6, government policies. Let us look in more details at the determinants of net export in order. First, consumer preferences for foreign and domestic goods. Now, if consumers prefers foreign goods, this one clearly will increase the imports. But if foreign consumers prefer the domestic goods, then this one will increase the exports. So preferences about the quality or characteristics of the products of domestic and foreign goods will affect the net export. Let us move to the second determinant of net exports, which is prices of foreign and domestic goods. Remember that in chapter 9, we discovered that prices determine the comparative advantage of countries in producing a particular goods. If prices for homogeneous goods is cheaper in a foreign country versus the domestic country, then what will happen? Well, the consumers will start to import that particular goods. Conversely, if the price of the domestic country, or the good produced in your country, is lower than the price of the same good produced in another country, then it means that your country will be a net export of that particular good. Third determinant of net export is income of the consumers in the domestic and foreign countries. Clearly, the richer are the consumer, the more are gonna consume. And the more they are gonna consume, the more they will love to consume more variety of goods. Therefore, the richer is a country, the more likely is that it's gonna import goods from abroad. Last but not least, the exchange rates at which foreign currency trades for the domestic currency. Now, when your currency is very strong, and we are going to discuss what this means, but when with your currency, dollars, you can buy a lot of other currencies, say euros or yen, then it's more likely that you want to buy products in other countries. And because of this one will increase your imports and therefore decrease your net export. Fifth, transportation costs. Clearly, transportation cost represents a physical barriers to trade. The more expensive is to ship goods from and to abroad, the less is the amount of export and imports. 6. Government policies. Now, the government can affect in a variety of ways the amount of net export, or to be precise, the amount of exports and imports. In order to affect the net export, we need to see later parts of these chapters. But by introducing tariffs to imports, the government can actually affect the level of exports and the levels of imports. In addition, political instabilities reduce resistance to tourism, and if you want, reducing the amount of imports from other countries. So the government can, in a variety of ways, affect exports and imports, though we need a theoretical background in order to understand the final effect on net export. Let us now move to the next section of this chapter, where we try to understand what are the determinants of the flows of assets between countries.
3, 2, 1, let's go!
You want to know what money sounds like? Go to a trading floor on Wall Street.
And this is what we are going to do. In order to understand the determinants of net capital flows, we need to understand what motivates traders in different countries to invest in assets in other countries. But before doing that, let's put our accountant hat again and provide some definition in order to measure the net capital flows. So, first, net capital flows represents the difference between domestic residents' purchases of foreign assets and foreign purchases of domestic assets. Now, domestic resident purchases of foreign assets is like USA citizens that decides to invest in different countries. Net capital outflows measure the differences between domestic resident purchases of foreign assets minus foreign purchases of domestic assets. Now, domestic resident purchases of foreign assets is like USA citizens that decide to invest in some Italian stock, like Valentino, Ferrari, Fiat, or conversely, foreign purchases of domestic assets are things like, I don't know, Italian that decides to buy an Apple stock. Now, people can invest, or if you want to be more precise, save in foreign assets in two ways: foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment. Foreign direct investment represents domestic residents that actively decides to manage a foreign investment. It's like McDonald's that decides to open a fast food outlet in Moscow. Conversely, foreign portfolio investment is like domestic residents that decide to purchase foreign stocks or bonds, and if you want, supply loanable funds to foreign firms. So the net capital outflows measure the imbalance in a country's trade in assets. Now, when net capital outflows is positive, means the capital is flowing out of your country. And this happens when the domestic purchases of foreign assets actually exceeds the foreign purchases of domestic assets. And if you want, it's like if your country is lending money to another country. Conversely, when net capital flows is negative, means the capital are inflowing in your country, which happens when foreign purchases of domestic assets actually exceeds the domestic purchases of foreign assets, which means that foreign countries are lending money to your country. Let us try now to understand the determinants of net capital flows. Keeping in mind that understanding the determinants on net capital flows tantamounts in understanding the determinants of traders' investments. Why traders decide to invest in the United States versus Europe or China. For this, I'm going to propose three main candidates. In particular, real interest rates of foreign assets and domestic assets. Second, perceived risk of holding foreign assets. And last but not least, government policies affecting foreign investments. Let us look at them in turn. First, traders, when they invest, they are looking at higher returns, higher real returns, increase in the purchasing power of their money. Therefore, real interest rate is one of the main determinants on net capital flows. If there is a higher real interest rate abroad, what the traders will do is to invest abroad. And this will increase the net capital outflows. Conversely, if the real interest rate is higher in the domestic country, then you will experience an inflow of capital from foreign countries in your countries, experiencing a net capital inflow that is a negative net capital outflow. Let us look at the second reason, which is perceived risks. Remember, in economics, we learned that there are no free lunch. Associated with a higher return, there is also a higher risk. Because of that, higher an increase in the perceived risk for the same real return abroad, what will cause? Well, will cause to invest less abroad. This will imply there is going to be less net capital flows and therefore a decrease in the net capital outflows. Or if you want, an increase of the net capital inflows. Third, government policies. Now, when you invest abroad, it's particularly important to understand what is the political environment in which you are investing. For this, I'm going to post a video in which you can see Chavez going around a city in Venezuela saying we are going to nationalize this building, and this building.
En aquella casita que está allá vivió Bolívar recién casado. Esa casita que se ve ahí con dos balcones. Y ahí lo que están unos negocios. Expropiese. Este edificio aquí, ¿cuál es? También es un edificio que tiene locales comerciales de propiedad privada. Expropiese, señor alcalde. Expropiese.
Now, what this video showed us is that the investment in these particular types of asset, basically because of political instability, has been completely lost. Countries that experience a higher instability will have problem to attract capital from abroad. So what they will do, they will experience, if you want, low net capital inflows. Or if you want, they will have higher net capital outflows. The goal of this section is to understand why net exports, that is the flows of goods, should be equal to net capital outflows, that is the flows of assets in equilibrium. To do this, let us study the simplest economy that we can think about, that is a barterer economy, an economy where there is no money, an economy where all the transactions happen by exchanging one good with another good. This example will help us to build a big intuition why net export and net capital flows are related together. So let us try to understand now the equality from net export to net capital flows. For this, let me draw a picture of our two marvelous country. this is supposed to be the United States, while this is supposed to be Italy. All right. So let us start by discussing a barter economy. So a barter economy is an exchange economy where there is no money going around and the only thing you can do is make transaction via exchange. So let us start from the first case. First case, what we have the United States that decides to export one of his great good, say this is a PC, to Italy. And what it happens? Well, in exchange, the United States has to get something back. Say that Italy decides to give in exchange two fancy Italian shirt. So the PC is produced in the United States and the shirts are produced in Italy. All right? So this is an example of an exchange. If there was no money, we are in a barter economy, what will happen in exchange of a computer, in this case this one will be USA export, the US will get a couple of t-shirts. So export is equal to import. So net export, which is equal to export minus import, will be equal to 0. Let us move to a second case, which is a more interesting case, in which basically the United States still keep producing computers. What it does, it exports a computer to Italy, a PC, but in exchange, it doesn't get anything today in period T. So in the United States, at this stage, what is doing, so this is going to be still USA export, but what the United States is doing is actually lending to Italy. At time T, say T equal 2020, it exports a PC, and what we get in T plus 1 equal 2020, we'll get in exchange what? Say 3 t-shirts. Okay, instead of 2, 3 t-shirts because there's been lending. This one will be USA import. So in 2020, the United States was lending to Italy and export was equal to a PC. In exchange, the import was 0, so net export was positive. So net export coincides with the United States lending to Italy. Then eventually in 2021, what will happen is Italy pays back. So export is equal to 0 from the United States, import is equal to the t-shirts, and net export is negative. So this barter economy allows us to build the intuition that net export being positive somehow is related with the fact that USA is lending. If net export conversely is negative, this is more related to the fact that the United States is actually borrowing. In this case, net export and import will cancel out, so net export after the 2 periods is going to be equal to 0. And this is what you should expect also in a richer economy. Richer economy, what I mean, not in terms of money, but a more complex economy where we move away, where it is an economy that is not anymore a barter economy, an exchange economy, but is an economy with money. From this example, we understood in a very simple economy, a barter economy, that having a positive net export, exporting more than importing, means like lending to other countries. Now, the $60,000 question is, does the story change when we consider an economy with money? And the answer is no, not really, but we have to follow the money. Let us now move to an economy with money. Again, here we have our favorite countries, USA and Italy. And let us consider the previous example. So, let's start with a first case. We have the United States that produces one computer. It exports, so this is USA exports, to Italy. And what will happen, say this is Apple, what will happen is that in exchange for the computer, what Apple will receive? Well, it will receive euros. Okay, so in Italy we have euros, United States we have dollars. In exchange of this computer, Apple will receive euros. Now, the secret in order to understand why net export is equal to net capital of flows is follow the money. So we really have to follow this fellow here, the euros. Now, what Apple can do with this money? Well, it can do a bunch of things. So, first, what it could do, it could go to a bank and get, in exchange of these euros, some dollars, and therefore bring back this money home in terms of dollars. Okay, say this one is 1,000 euro. This one will be $1,200. The bank will exchange rate, say $1.2 per euro. Something like this. But then the story is not over, right? Now the bank has in its belly these euros. What the bank can do with these euros? Well, what the bank will do will give these euros to some firm in Europe that can use this in order to invest. Or it can invest this euro in the European stock market, say the Italian stock market, and buy with these euros some shares, say in an Italian company, say Armani, or say shares in Armani. And again, what Armani will do with this? Well, it will invest. And you can see what we have to do. We have to follow the money. What will happen is that by basically selling this computer to Italy, what the United States is doing is actually lending money. To be precise, is lending real resources. Don't want to talk about money. Actually, is lending real resources. And we understood that by following what Apple can do with this money. One, it can go to the bank, but the bank is going to do this. Alternatively, Apple by itself could go and use these euros in order to, say, buy firms in Europe, or investing in the European stock market. Again, this is a decision that Apple can do. In any case, by following the money, will happen that this euro is kind of, by selling this PC in Europe, what Apple is doing is actually lending resources to Europe. Apple has sold a PC, and in exchange of this PC, USA export, it gets some euro. All right? So let us try to be very precise. Here the export is only a PC, import is equal to 0, so net export is positive, and we realize that this coincides with lending resources to Europe. What Apple does when it gets this euro, it can do basically a bunch of things. The first one, it can directly buy firms in Europe, or it can buy shares of firms. This one would be foreign direct investment. This is portfolio investment. Or it can go to an intermediary like a bank that eventually would do the same. Okay? Now, in a way or in another, there has to be, this example becomes very clear with the bank, in exchange of a demand of euro from the bank, Apple gets dollars that can bring back to the United States. But there has to be a demand for these euros. Let's suppose that there is no demand of euros. Okay, let us basically do this thought experiment. There is no demand for euro. Well, in that case, Apple by itself should demand a euro, because in a way or another, what she gets in exchange of a PC is euros. So Apple may want to have euros for investing in firms in Europe, or in a way or another, by foreign direct investment or portfolio investment. But in any case, there has to be a demand for euro. So USA export coincides with a demand for euro. If there is no for the demand for euro, then eventually there is not a transaction. This transaction will not happen. Let's suppose Apple does not want to have euro, and bank do not want euros, they will never exchange any dollar for euros, then there will not be a transaction at the beginning, so US export will be 0, and the demand for euro will be 0. Sorry, the demand of euro is 0, therefore the USA export will be 0. Let me try to see if I can go back and take away these notes. I'm gonna unwind. Wonderful. So USA export, which is the export of this laptop, has to coincide, there has to be a demand for euro. But in this example, we have that export is equal to PC, import is equal to 0, so net export is positive. So it's clear from here that net export greater to 0 has to be equal to a demand of euro that is positive. Demand of euro for what reason? Demand of euro for investment purpose. See here, when Apple gives basically a PC in exchange of euro, here at this stage Here, there has to be a demand of euros for investment purposes. Demand of euro for investment purposes. In particular, to be more precise, there has to be a foreign demand of euros for investment purposes in euro, which is one of the two legs of net capital flows. Net capital flows represents the difference between domestic residents' purchases of foreign assets and foreign purchases of domestic assets. Is foreign demand because I'm considering the perspective from euros, but will be the domestic demand for foreign assets, in this case the foreign asset. Actually, I don't want to confuse you, so I'm going to put here domestic in the sense of USA, demand of foreign assets, in this case I would say euro, for investment purposes in Europe. So this one is the first leg. And net capital flows is this minus the foreign demand of domestic assets, which is the other voice here. In this case, will be equal to 0. So from this example, we get that net export is equal to net capital outflows. Strong with the intuition from the previous slides, understanding why net export coincides with net capital flows in a more complex economy becomes an easy job. Let us get into it. So US exports, we mentioned before, coincides with the domestic, in this case from the perspective of the United States. So USA demand for euros. And if you remember the example, in exchange of a PC, Apple gets some euros. So there has to be someone that wants to exchange then eventually with this euro for dollars. So there has to be a demand, a US demand for euros, someone that gives dollar in exchange of these euros. Similarly, or if you want symmetrically, US import represents a foreign demand for dollars. You can think about a company in Italy selling a very nice Chianti in the United States, getting some dollar in exchange, and then there has to be a need of someone that wants to exchange this dollar back to euros. So there has to be a demand for dollars from foreign investors. Net export is equal US exports minus US import. And symmetrically, net capital flows is equal to US demand for euros minus the foreign demand for dollars. And this one is captured by these lines. Net export is equal to the difference between US exports minus US import, the net export, and this has to be equal to the right-hand side, which is the US investors' demand for euros minus the foreign investors' demands for dollars that coincide with the net capital outflows. So this is an accounting identity. Net capital flows by national income account identity is always equal to net export. And it arises because every transaction that affects net export, like Apple selling a PC in Europe or firm from Tuscany in Italy selling a Chianti in California, well, this will trigger also some exchange of money that is captured by the net capital outflows. Here, resistance when a foreigner purchases a good from the United States, US export and net export increases. This is our example of Apple selling a PC. So when a foreigner in Italy purchases a PC from the United States, the US export increase. The foreigner pays with currency or assets. In our example, it was paying with euros, the PC. And the US acquires some foreign asset. The Apple acquires some euros, causing the net capital outflows to rise. When a US citizen buys foreign goods, conversely, we have that US imports rise. As instance, when a US buys a Chianti from Italy, then US imports rise and net export falls. In this case, the US buyer pays with US dollars, so the other country acquires some US asset, causing net capital flows to fall. Let us now discuss the national income account identity in an open economy. Now, in chapter 13, we derived a relationship between savings and investment in a closed economy. What we are going to do in this section is to try to understand how the relationship between savings and investment changes in an open economy. And in particular, we are trying to understand how this term arises from the national income account identity. So let's get started. We start from the national income account identity, where the level of output is equal to consumption expenditure, investment, government expenditure, and we are going to consider, basically these are the voices in a closed economy, and we are going to consider an open economy. In an open economy, part of the real GDP that is produced does not go only to domestic consumption, domestic investment, and domestic government expenditure, but also abroad. Is both in the form of net export. Let us rearrange this equation. Particularly, let us bring consumption and government expenditure on the left-hand side. What we have here is that whatever amount of output or GDP is not consumed by the consumer or the government, it goes in terms of domestic investment or net export. But what is this term here? Well, this term here, y minus c minus g, is nothing else than the national savings. Remember, the national savings is equal to the private savings plus the public savings. Okay? Where, let me write it here, the public savings are equal to the amount of taxes that is not used for government expenditure, and the private savings is the share of disposable income, so the income that is not taxed away, that is used for consumption, that is not used for consumption, so 1 minus MPC. Please go to chapter 13 to review this identity. So national savings is equal to y minus c minus g. So we can substitute this term here. So national savings is equal to investment plus net export. But in the previous slides, we derived that net export is equal to net capital flows. So savings in an open economy is equal to investment plus net capital outflows. In the case in which national savings are higher than domestic investment, then the excess of loanable funds flow abroad in the form of positive net capital outflows. If you want, if you are saving more than what is needed by your economy in terms of investment, you can actually use these savings in order to invest abroad. Conversely, when the savings is lower than the level of domestic investment, means that this domestic investment is not only financed by the national savings. No, there has to be some inflow of money from other countries in the form of investment. And this coincides with a negative net capital outflow. Let us do this exercise very quickly. If savings is less than domestic investment, then which one of these conditions, which one of these answer is correct? So let us work it out. Savings is less, let me take a pen. Savings is less than investment. What is the definition of savings? Is output minus consumption minus government expenditure should be less than investment. Now here we have y, all the y's that are on the left hand side, so let me bring the other terms on the right hand side and see which one is the correct one. So y is less than c plus I plus j. Which one of these is correct? B is the correct one. So what is happening here is that domestic investment is higher than the national savings. So for our equation, this means that there has to be a net capital inflows in the economy that is positive, which means that our domestic investment is not only financed by our national savings, but also by some net capital inflow. Another way of writing it is savings is equal to I plus net capital flows, because remember, net capital inflows is equal minus net capital outflows. Okay, so minus net capital outflows plus savings is equal to investment. Savings is equal to investment plus net capital outflows. So let us now discuss the trade deficit in the United States. So where trade deficits means net export is negative. So there is a net capital inflow of money in the economy. The US trade deficit reached record levels in 2006 and remained high in 2007 and 2008. Now recall that net export is equal to net capital outflow and is the difference between domestic savings and investment. So if you want, let us rearrange this one in a more useful way. So savings is equal to investment plus net capital outflows. Or another way of putting it is that net capital inflows plus savings is equal to investment. Let us be precise. So in the United States, net capital flows is equal to net export and it is negative. Okay, this is a negative term. What does it mean? That there are not flows of money outside the United States, but there is a flow of money inside the United States. And this is captured by net capital inflows that is equal to the minus net capital outflows, and it is positive. So given this, we can rewrite as equal I minus net capital inflows. So savings plus net capital inflows is equal to investment. Now, which is the expression reported here on top. What does this mean? This means that domestic investment in the United States since 1982, we discussed the graph in a previous part of this chapter, but basically the United States from 1982 has been experiencing negative trade net export. As negative net export, which means has been experiencing a trade deficit, which means that basically the domestic investment in the United States has been financed not only by domestic savings, which is this object here, national savings, but also by flows of savings from abroad, which are the net capital inflows. So domestic investment has been financed by national saving and inflows of capital from other countries. So a trade deficit means, properly this, that the domestic investment has been greater than national savings, which means it has been financed also by an inflow of other capital. And in 2007, foreign purchases of US assets actually exceeded US purchase of foreign assets by 775 millions. Now, such deficit has been the norm since the 1980s, as we were mentioning before. So let us look at the historical graph. So let us look at a graph that plots, if you want, net capital outflows that coincides with the net export, and also plots the other two terms of our national income accounted entities, that is, savings is equal to investment plus net capital outflows. Now, first of all, notice something, that since 1982, net capital flows has been negative, net export, which means the United States have been importing more than what they have exported, which means the United States have been borrowing from other countries, from the rest of the world. Right? And here I'm plotting on the top of the graph what investment and savings. Okay? As you can see here, basically there is the series of investment in blue and the savings. Now, notice something, that savings, if you want, have been higher than investment. The last time that they've been higher than investment was something like 1982. After that, savings have been lower than investment. Or if you want, investment has been greater than savings, which means part of this investment has to be financed by some net capital inflows. Positive net capital inflows. This is the purpose of the graph. Now, the question is why the United States savings have been less than investment? Why is this the case that we have this? Well, in the 1980s and early 2000s, there has been a huge government budget deficit and low private saving that depressed national savings. So one of the reasons is that national savings have been very low. And the reason has been twofold. Well, we know that national savings is equal to public savings and to private savings. Here, what it's saying is that the government has experienced a lot of budget deficits. Budget deficit means that T minus G is negative. So actually we have negative public savings. And in addition, we have low private savings. So our consumer, 1 minus MPC, Y minus T, our consumer has been consuming a lot. If you want the propensity to save, which is 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume, the marginal propensity to save of consumers in the United States has been very low. And these one together have depressed national savings. So the first reason why savings have been lower than investment is that national savings were weak. So this term, national savings, was weak. In addition, in the 1990s, national savings increased as the economy grew, but something else happened. Investment has increased even faster. So national savings in the 90s has started growing, but domestic investment has been growing even faster due to the technology boom. So the question, the $60,000 question is the US trade deficit a problem? And the extra capital stock from the 90s actually has been financing an investment boom, which yield large returns. So attracting capital from abroad, net capital inflow plus savings equal investment. If you attract a lot of capital and this capital is used for investment that yield a high return, that's very good. Because remember, net capital flows equal net export. If this is negative, means that your country is borrowing. But if your country is borrowing to invest in a very high yield return, oh, that is good. That is something that actually is good. But the fall in saving in the 80s, while not desirable, at least did not depress the domestic investment, since firms at least could borrow from abroad. Now, the real problem could be the moment in which these net capital inflows do not finance investment. So when they do not go to finance investment, but when they go to finance some form of consumption of the consumer or the government, in which case then eventually could be a symptom of a problem. Let us now work on these clicker questions. The US export are 300 billions. So export is equal 300. US imports are 500 billions. So import is equal to 500. Which of the following are consistent with the level on net export? So this one implies that net export, which is equal to export minus import, is equal to minus 200. So for sure what we have from here is that we have a trade deficit. So the solution could be even, the candidate for the solution is C or D. The US purchases 800 billion worth of foreign assets, and foreign countries purchase 600 billions worth of US assets. So we have to find, basically, we have to use the relationship net export equal net capital flows in order to figure out which one of C and D is correct. Now net export is minus 200. Now what we want the US demand for foreign assets has to be lower than the foreign demand for US assets. So the solution is D, where we have that 600 minus 800. 600 is the demand, the US demand of foreign assets, and foreign countries purchase 800 billion is the foreign demand of US assets. So the solution is D. We have now concluded the first two sections of these chapters where we discuss the flow of goods and the flow of assets. Now we move from quantities to prices, and we are going to discuss the prices in an open economy, particularly our key prices. Now, if we think carefully about whatever we have analyzed so far, we had basically pointed out four main goods. In particular, we have talked about domestic goods, foreign goods, and then we have other two goods that are given by the currency in your country and the currency in the foreign country. Now, when we think about an open economy, what we think about is the exchange rates between these goods. In particular, the nominal exchange rate is going to talk about the exchange rates between foreign currency and domestic currency, while the real exchange rates will tell us about the ability of exchanging domestic goods with foreign goods. Let us look them in turn, first analyzing the nominal exchange rates and then the real exchange rate. Let us move to the nominal exchange rate. The nominal exchange rate is the rate at which your domestic currency trades for other currency. So your domestic currency, dollars, trades for other types of currencies. Now, as instance in this example, we have a dollar that trades for 0.9 euros. So for every dollar, you get 0.9 euros. Now, the nominal exchange rate is the rate at which one country currency trades for another. Now, we express all exchange rates as foreign currency per unit of domestic currency. So here is foreign currency for unit of domestic currency. In our previous example was dollar per euro, which was 0.9. Some exchange rates for the, basically in 2014, Canadian dollar was 1.12, which means 1.12 Canadian dollars for $1. Euro was 0.73 euros per dollar. Japanese yen is 124 yen again per dollar. This type of convention on measuring foreign currency over domestic currency is defined as incertum per certum. So this type of classification of the nominal exchange rate is defined in certum per certum. Certum means known or below unknown. So the numerator is unknown while the denominator is known. The numerator is unknown while the denominator is always 1. Alternatively, we could use another convention that I'm going to put it here, which is the certum per incertum, which would have the dollar here, and here the uncertain quantity. Okay, this will be another way of measuring it, but forget about this. We are going to use this conversion. So the denominator will always be dollars. Mexican peso, 30.41. All right, so let us introduce two concepts, which is the concepts of appreciation and the concept of depreciation too. So let us start from the first case, A. Let's suppose that we start from an equilibrium where a dollar trades for 1 euro. So you can exchange $1 in exchange of 1 euro. Okay? Now, what does it mean that the dollar appreciates? The dollar appreciates when in exchange of $1, you get now, starting from 1 to 1, you get now more euros. In this case, will be 16 euros. You wish. Okay? So in this case, basically what happens is that the dollar becomes stronger. The dollar appreciates. And the reason is that with the dollar now you can get more euros. Conversely, the dollar depreciates, where for $1, in exchange of $1, now you don't get even a euro, you get 8 cents of a euro. Okay? In this case, for $1, you get less. So it's always the concept of appreciation is a relative concept, which means you start from a baseline, an initial value, and the dollar appreciates when you get more euros with it, and depreciates when you get less euro with it. Appreciation also means that there is an increase in the value of the currency as measured by the amount of foreign currency it can buy. So it appreciates when you get more, and it depreciates when you get less, in which case your currency weakens, so it becomes less strong, and there is a decrease in the value of your currency with respect to foreign currency. Okay? Example, during 2007, the US dollar depreciated 9.5%, around 10% against the euro. What does it mean? It was able to buy 10% less euros than it was able before, but appreciated with respect to South Korea won by 1.5%. Okay, so it became weaker than the euro and stronger than the Korean one. Let us move now to a new concept, that is the concept of the real exchange rate. The real exchange rate is the rate at which goods and services of one country trades for goods and services of another country. While with the nominal exchange rates, we look at the rate at which you trade currency for currency, in the exchange rates, the rate will be US goods for foreign goods. And the real is coming from the fact that we're talking about the rate at which basket of goods trade within each other. So the real exchange rate is this number. Is this number that tells us for a good, US good, a US burger, how many foreign goods, in this case burgers, would you get? So let us try to derive in an intuitive way how can we compute this ratio. Okay? So the goal is to find if I give away one US good, which is a burger. Okay? The question is how many burgers can I buy in, say, Italy? That's the $65,000 question. Okay? So we start from one good in the United States. What we do, well, we want to get a good in another country. So what we do, well, we sell it. Okay? The price of this burger is $5. So in exchange of the burger, the US burger, we get $5. So now we don't have any more the burger. Now we have the dollars. And again, the goal is to find how many Italian burgers we can buy. That's the quantity. So we need to buy an Italian burger. First, we cannot buy it using dollars. So we go to the currency market and we exchange these dollars for euros. So now we do another transaction where we give away our $5 and we get some euros. How many? For each dollar we get 0.9 euros. So in total we get 4.5 euro. So now we don't have any more, in step 2, we don't have any more dollars, now we have euros. Okay? But now that we have euros, 4.5 euros, now we are able to buy an Italian burger. And we have to check, first of all, how much does it cost to buy in Italy this burger. So what we want to do is to give this 4.5 euros and see how many burgers can we get in Italy. For this, we need the price of the burgers. Let us look. Oh, the price is very expensive. So basically, for 4.5 euros, we can get less of a burger, something like half of a burger. So for a US burger, we get half of an Italian burger. And this is the exchange rate between the goods and services that we are considering. This was just a simple example where we use burgers. We can extend this one to the basket, if you want a commodity, a basket of goods that are representative of the two countries in order to derive the same formula. So Let us be a little bit more formal and use this intuition in a more systematic way. So the real exchange rate is computed using this formula. Now we derived this formula before. And in particular, let's derive it again such that we have all the steps fixed in our mind. This P represents step 1, okay? The first P represents step 1, which is I have a burger in my hands, which is the denominator. So I have a US burger, and what I do, I exchange the burger for some dollars. Okay, how many dollars? Well, the price of the burger in US, which is $5. Wonderful. So now I have $5. In step 2, what I'm doing, I'm going to exchange these $5 for euros. At what rates? The nominal exchange rate here. The nominal exchange rate is the exchange rate that we have seen in the previous slides. Okay, so we have now $5 here, and basically we give away our $5 and we get in exchange how many euros? Well, is given by $5 times 0.9 euros per dollar, okay, which is in total 4.5 euros. Wonderful. So as step 3, what we have 4.5 euros. What we do, we give 4.5 euros, and the question is that with 4.5 euros, how many burgers can we buy? Well, we have to divide 4.5 euros by the price of the burger in the foreign country, which is P star. So E times P is equal to 4.5 euros. What is the price of a burger in Italy? Was 8 euros. So what you get there is equal something like 0.5 of an Italian burger for US burger. Italian burger for 1 US burger. Okay, let us do it again. So we start point 1 with 1 burger. Okay, in exchange of this burger we get some dollar. How many? P, which is this P here. Then eventually with this with these dollars we want to exchange in euros. How many euros? We multiply these dollars by the nominal exchange rate of euros per dollar, which is telling us we're going to get 4.5 euros, which is this numerator here. Then with 4.5 euros, how many burgers can we buy? Well, we have to look at the price, not the domestic price. This was the domestic price in point 1. Now we have to look at the price in the foreign country for a burger, which was 8 euros. So as a result, we get 0.5 Italian burgers per US burger. Okay? And this just builds on our previous intuition, which is this graph here. We start from 1 burger, point 1, we get in exchange basically P dollars. This is the price, the domestic price, $5. In exchange of this $5, how many euros do we get? We go to the currency market in step 2 and we get 4.5 euros, which is given by $5 multiplied by 0.9 euro per dollar. And again, this is the nominal exchange rate that we have seen in the previous slides. And then with these dollars that we get, 4.5, we had to look how much does it cost in the foreign country, the burger. And with this, basically, we can get the exchange rate between the burger in the United States and the burger in Italy. Let us now discuss the concept of appreciation and depreciation for the real exchange rate. So we start from a scenario where we have an exchange rate between a US burger and an Italian burger, Italian I mean foreign, of 1. Then the real exchange rate appreciates when for one burger you get, from one US burger, you get more Italian burgers, and depreciates when for one US burger you get less Italian burgers. Again, is a relative concept. Example with one good. So let's suppose that a Big Mac costs $2.5 in US, which is 400 yen and 400 yen in Japan. This one would be P star, and this one would be our P in our previous graph. So the nominal exchange rate is 120 yen per dollar. So for every dollar, we get 120 yen. So if we sell a burger in the United States, how many dollars do we get? P. And what is, if you want, the price in yen of the US Big Mac? Well, it's given by how many dollars do we get when we sell a Big Mac, and how many yen do we get for these dollars, which is 120 yen per dollar, which is, this one is the nominal exchange rate, and how many dollars do we get by selling the Big Mac? 2.5, which is the price. Then, once we have this numerator, which is basically the price in yen of US Big Mac, we compare basically this 300 yen with the price in the foreign country, which is 400. With 300 yen, which is the value of a Big Mac in yen, and 400 yen is the value of the Big Mac in Japan, it means that the exchange rate between one Big Mac, US Big Mac, and a Japan Big Mac is 0.75. For a US Big Mac, you get 0.75 Japanese Big Macs. So the correct interpretation is that to buy a Big Mac in the United States, a Japanese citizen must sacrifice an amount that could purchase 0.75 Big Macs in Japan. Let us do a couple of activity learnings. So let us start a case where we have a nominal exchange rate of 10 pesos per dollar. The price of a Starbucks latte is P in the US and is equal to 24 P star in Mexico. What is the price of a US latte measured in pesos? That's easy. We just multiply P times A and calculate the real exchange rate measured as Mexican lattes per US latte. In any case, this is the numerator, we have to compute it. So, what is the price of US latte in peso? Well, you have a US latte. For a US latte, we get $3. With $3, we get 30 pesos. So what is the price of US latte in pesos? 30 pesos. Let us look at this. You sell the US latte for $3. For $3, you get, for each dollar, 10 pesos. So it's 30 pesos per US latte, which is the numerator of the real exchange rate. So computing the real exchange rate, we just divide 30 by the price in Mexico, which is 30 divided by 24, which is 1.25 Mexican lattes per US latte. Now, that was an example with a real exchange rate with one good. Let's move with many goods. With many goods, we don't have just one price, like $3. We need a price of a representative basket of goods. But we have the price, it's called the consumer price index for the representative basket of goods that is bought by the consumer. Or could be the GDP price deflator, if we are considering the GDP price. So we can use the consumer price index for the foreign price level, and then eventually the real exchange rate is just the nominal exchange rate that we look in the newspaper for the currency market. We take the CPI in USA and the CPI in the foreign country, and this ratio, this number here, whatever this number it is, say 1.2, will tell us the price of domestic basket of goods relative to price of foreign basket of goods, which in this case, for one basket of good in our country, will buy us 1.2 basket of goods in foreign country. Okay? If US real exchange rate appreciates, you can get more goods. US goods become more expensive relative to foreign goods. What does it mean? For every good in USA, every one representative good in USA, you get more representative goods abroad, which means the US basket of goods is more expensive, is valued more. Conversely, if the real exchange rate depreciates, then it means that for one basket of representative good in USA, you get less basket of representative good abroad. Okay, always less, more, because appreciation and depreciation are relative concept. We have to start from a level and then check whether the numerator goes up or down. Let us look at this example. If the real exchange rate for coal is 1.5, so E times P over P star is equal to 1.5. The price of coal in the US is 50 per ton, so the price of coal in the US is $50. And the price of coal in Britain is 20 British pound, is 20 pounds per ton. What is the nominal exchange rate? Well, here we have just to plug this number inside. All right, so we have the E times 50 divided by 20 is equal to 1.5. So the nominal exchange rate is equal to 2/5 of, and this one is equal to 1.5. So the solution is 3.5. Let us now move to another novel but very interesting concept, which is the concept of the law of one price. Now, the law of one price is the notion that a good should sell for the same price in all markets. In particular, I want to be precise, an homogeneous good should sell for the same price in all markets, under some assumption. And the intuition behind it is very simple. Suppose, for instance, that a coffee sells for £4 in Seattle and £5 in Boston, and can be costlessly transported. Important, this is one of the assumptions that we are making. Now, try to think about what would you do? Is there a possibility here of making money without taking any risk? Yes, there is. Stop the video if you don't see it, pause it, and let us look it together. So, a strategy that I have in mind could be something like the following. I'm gonna borrow $4 that I had to repay back to the bank. Okay? I'm gonna borrow $4, and what I'm going to do it is to go in Seattle and buy, in exchange of $4, I can get a coffee in Seattle. Okay? Then what I would do with this coffee in Seattle, let's suppose we can keep it hot. Well, I'm gonna sell it in Boston. And in exchange of the coffee, I get $5. Now, I had to repay back the bank, so I get $5, but I had to repay back the bank $4. Let's suppose the interest rate was 0, just for simplicity. Oh, I have made $1 profit. This type of situation where there is a good, the same good, homogeneous, that sells for different prices in two places, what will happen is that the two prices, people will start doing these arbitrages, driving the price to the same level. Why is this the case? Well, let us look at point 2 and point 3. If people keeps doing this type of arbitrages, so making quick profits without taking any risk, what will happen is that these arbitrages will drive at point 2 the price of coffee in Seattle up. Basically in Seattle, if we have here quantity and here is the price of the coffee, because of point 2, people will keep buying coffee, driving the price, say, from 4 to 4.5. Okay? And at the same time, because of these arbitrageurs, that instead in Boston, quantity, price. In Boston, what will happen, these arbitrageurs will work as a supply, driving down the price from 5 to say 4.5. So by keeping doing this arbitrage that push the demand up in Boston, and the supply down, if you want high, but increase the supply in Boston, what will do? Well, they will increase the price in Seattle. So the price in Seattle will go up, and they will decrease the price in Boston. Okay? Eventually, the two prices have to coincide. In this example, 4.5. Okay? This intuition is as simple as that. The purchasing power parity is applying this simple intuition to exchange rates. So it's a theory for which an exchange rate whereby a unit of any currency, so a unit of any currency should be able to buy the same quantity of goods in all countries. It's based on the law of one price and implies that nominal exchange rates adjust to equalize the price of a basket of goods across countries. The nominal exchange rate will make this happen. So let us try to be more precise. So the purchasing power parity tells us that there is a law of one price. For one good in one country, you can get a good in another country. It's a 1-to-1, okay? With the same money in one country, you can buy the same amount of good in any country, okay? Now, this purchasing power parity assumes that the price is fixed here, and the nominal exchange rate E star, is the one that adjusts to make the case that one good in one country is exchangeable for one good in another country. That is, make happen that nominal exchange rate adjusts to equalize the price of a basket of goods across country. Okay, so whereby a unit of any currency should be able to buy the same quantity of goods in all countries. Let us make an example. Suppose the basket contains a Big Mac. So we don't have many goods, we just have one good. Suppose that the price is P is the price of US Big Mac, and this is the price of a Japanese Big Mac in yen. E is the nominal exchange rate. According to the PPP, what we get is that one burger in one country should exchange for one burger in the other country, US, Japan, which means this is 1-to-1, which means EP over P is equal to 1. Let us rearrange. Bring this one on the right-hand side, you get this equation. Okay? This is the price of a US Big Mac in yen. This is the price of a Japanese Big Mac in yen. Now, the same currency should buy the same amount. So 1 and 1. So nominal exchange rate will adjust to make it happen. The nominal exchange rate will adjust to make it happen. Let us now investigate the implication of the purchasing power parity on the key variable of interest, in particular the nominal exchange rate. Now, the purchasing power parity implies that the nominal exchange rate between two countries should be equal to the ratio of the price level. Now, what does that mean? Well, this means this equality that you can see here. Okay? Now, this is an equality that holds for every t. T equal to 2019, t equal to 2020. Therefore, this holds also in changes. In particular, if you remember one of our previous slides, we understand how we can compute the change of E over E. In particular, if you remember from one previous slides, we know how to compute the relative change of the right-hand side, the relative change of a ratio. The relative change of a ratio, let me write it here, x over y is equal to the difference between the relative changes. So in this case, the left-hand side will be the relative change in the nominal exchange rate is equal to the rate of change in the numerator minus the rate of change in the denominator. But what is the numerator and what is this first term and second term? The first term is inflation in the foreign country. Foreign country inflation. While this term here is the inflation in the domestic country. Remember, inflation, we know how to is determined. You can go back to the previous chapter and you can see how the monetary policy affects inflation. We'll look at several examples. Okay? But this implies that changes in inflation in the countries, in the foreign and domestic countries, affects the nominal exchange rate. Let us look at this. If the two countries have different inflation rates, then E will change over time. And in particular, if the inflation in the foreign country is higher than in the US, what will happen? Let us check. So inflation in the foreign minus inflation is equal to the change in the nominal exchange rate, the relative change. If deflation is higher in Mexico than the US, say 3% versus 2%, we get 3% minus 2%. This is equal 1%. So the nominal exchange rate between dollars and euros, dollars and pesos, so if you want, E is pesos per dollar, will go up. So the dollar will appreciate against the peso. Why? Because this is positive. Delta E equal 1% is positive. Okay? So the dollar will appreciate with respect to the peso. Conversely, if the inflation in the domestic country is higher, which means say this is a 3%, is 2% in Japan, 2% in Japan, 3% in the US, then delta E over E, which is equal to the difference between these two, is equal to minus 1, which is negative. So what will happen is that the exchange rate between dollar and yen will go down. So the dollar will depreciate. Okay? Wonderful. So let us do a very quick clicker. A pair of jeans cost $25 in the US, P, and 1,600 dinar in Algeria, P star. If the nominal exchange rate is 75 dinar per US dollar, 75 dollar, then the real exchange rate is what? Well, we have just to put this number together. The real exchange rate is equal to the nominal exchange rate times the domestic CPI, if you want, or price, and the foreign price, which is P star. So is equal to let us check it here. So it's 1,600 in Algeria. Pair of jeans cost $25 in $25 here. And if the nominal exchange rate is 75, is this. So we had to compute 75 times 25, which is equal to 1875 divided by 1,600 is 1.17, which is greater than 1. So is more than 1, could be A or B. In this case, what it's saying is that it's cheaper to buy basically these jeans in Algeria and selling them in the United States. So the solution is A. So let us conclude the chapter by briefly discuss the limitations of the purchasing power parity theory. There are two main reasons why exchange rates do not always adjust to equalize prices across countries, and in particular here for exchange rates, it means nominal exchange rates. First, many goods cannot be easily traded. As instance, haircuts, and therefore, being the fact that cannot be easily traded, the price difference of such goods cannot be arbitraged away. As instance, for as much as I like to get my haircut from my hairdresser in Italy, basically there cannot be price competition with hairdressers here in Boulder. Then a second reason is for domestic goods may not be perfect substitute. So if goods are not homogeneous, and in particular if they differ in quality and some attributes of this quality are not perfect substitutes, then eventually basically the purchasing power parity will not hold here. As instance, consumers prefer Toyotas over Chevys or etc. So price difference reflect taste differences. Nonetheless, the purchasing power parity works in many cases, especially in the long run, if we are looking at long run trends. For example, the purchasing power parity implies that countries that experience higher level of inflation should observe their currency to depreciate faster relative to low inflation countries like the United States. The data indeed support this prediction. Here in this graph, what we are doing, we are plotting the nominal exchange rate, particularly the average annual depreciation, so in this case should be negative, and the average annual CPI inflation in their country. So basically this one will be the domestic inflation, and countries that experience higher inflation will observe a higher average depreciation rate. In our formula, if we increase pi, which is the horizontal dimension here, we decrease basically the relative percentage change of the nominal exchange rate, which means our currency will depreciate. Okay, here we are plotting minus of this left-hand side. And with this, guys, we have concluded the chapter.